I want to begin this sabbatical report by saying thank you, thank you, thank you to the church. This sabbatical experience, these 4 months from May 8th through September 8th, were an incredible gift. I had a chance to do so many amazing things. I had a chance to really rejuvenate and relax, take some time away to refill my cup so that I could come back and be able to help fill all of your cup even better from now going forward. I had a chance to do a lot of family time with the kids. I also had a chance to spend some time in retreat, silent prayer, and time alone with God, as well as some educational experiences with our tour of Turkey and Greece in the footsteps of St. Paul and his missionary ministries that have changed the entire world. I also had a chance to spend some time at the end of the sabbatical working on some leadership books, specifically about leading churches through difficult and turbulent and stressful times, which could not be more appropriate today. So I want to start off by saying thank you, and I plan to talk about the things I have learned in my sabbatical over 4 distinct sermon series over the coming year, and hope that it will inform my ministry for years to come. This video is a chronological attempt to give an overview of what we were doing, what I was doing in this time. So in May, Sarah and I began the sabbatical by taking a trip, just the 2 of us, and we started in Istanbul, Turkey, which was an incredible place to visit. It's a huge, vibrant, cosmopolitan city of over 20 million people, twice the size of New York. Had no idea it was so big and amazing, and it's an incredible place to visit. If you haven't been, I highly recommend it. There's so many things I could talk about, but I'm going to highlight one thing, which was the world famous Hagia Sophia, or Hagia Sophia, which is a huge temple, church, cathedral. Any of those words would be appropriate. Construction began in the year 360 AD under the guidance of Emperor Constantine. This building is one of, depends on who you ask, if not the largest domed structure in the entire world. And for over 1,400 years, the current building has stood as a monument, a temple to God. People have been praying there. It was initially Christian. It was taken over as a Muslim mosque for centuries during the Ottoman Empire. It is now seen in both capacities. It is a holy place for both Christians and Muslims. Sarah and I landed early in the morning at 5 o'clock into Istanbul, and were able to go and see this incredible space. Early in the morning, the light was streaming in. There were just a few people there. It was truly a holy moment to be able to be in the presence of God and the place where people have been praying to God for 1,500 years. It's amazing. So that was an incredible experience, and truly one of the sacred moments that filled my cup at the very beginning of this time together. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the food in Istanbul. Turkish food is incredibly delicious and amazing, and we had a chance to eat at some great restaurants right there in the downtown area of Istanbul. And then we continued our tour and went to see the ancient city, the ancient ruins of Ephesus in Turkey, also a place where St. Paul spent a lot of time, 2 years according to the book of Acts, preaching to the people, developing the early church, organizing the structures of the deacons and elders and how the church will be established, converting untold hundreds, if not thousands of people in Ephesus to the new Christianity. It was an incredible story in the Bible, which we'll be preaching through in the near future. And it was incredible to actually walk down the same steps, the same streets that St. Paul walked 2,000 years ago. We were able to see the amphitheater. We were able to see, our guide was incredible, showed us the symbols that ancient Christians carved into the rocks to be symbols for other Christians in the underground churches when they were being persecuted. It's an amazing history there, and we had a chance to walk through it. There's nothing quite like being in those places thousands of years later. It's amazing. And then we continued to go through some other Greek islands. We're going to see Santorini and Limnos and Spetses, beautiful islands in the Aegean Sea. And then Rhodes was one of my favorite places. The island of Rhodes is the largest preserved medieval city in all of Europe. And we got a chance to walk through there. St. Paul was there briefly as well. And it was taken over as a separate nation for a while, as a Christian nation, by the Knights of St. John, who occupied for centuries this city. And you can walk the same streets where Christian missionaries and soldiers and dignitaries slept, ate, where they lived for so long during the centuries of the occupation by the Knights of St. John. It's incredible to see, again, the same places that they walked down hundreds of years ago. And then we ended up in Athens, Greece, which of course was another place where Paul preached and converted many of the learned men, of course they were all men at the time, and the philosophers and the rulers, the academics of the day, and he sat and discussed with them the gospel of Jesus Christ and turned a huge faction of them into early Christians in Athens as well. And it was amazing to be in some of those places. And of course, walking through the Parthenon, the very birthplace of democracy as well, which is where Paul was doing his teaching. And then we came home and spent some time back with our children as they finished out their school year in May. And we had a chance to do a very brief trip over Memorial Day to have a little beach time in Myrtle Beach. It was lovely. We just flew to Myrtle Beach. We're right there at the Embassy Suites on the water, walked out to the beach for 3 days over Memorial Day. It was wonderful to have a chance. It was warm and beautiful, and the kids loved playing in the ocean. Then from there, we came back to Canton, and I took my silent retreat time. So for 5 days, I was at the Abbey of Gethsemani, which is the oldest continuous monastic community in this country. It was founded in 1848, and there have been monks living there ever since. It is in the beautiful foothills of Kentucky. It is about an hour or so south of Louisville, Kentucky, very close to Bardstown in the bourbon country of Kentucky, which is why I was able to bring back some bourbon fruitcake for the church, because the monks make a living by producing amazingly delicious flavored fudges and the fruitcakes and other sweet treats, and they sell that there. That's one of the ways they make a living. Because I was able to be with these monks. There's about 30 active brothers that live there and taken monastic vows for the week. There was about 25 other retreatants at the time, and we were in silence the entire time for our meals throughout our day, and we were invited to join the monks for their prayer services. They meet 7 times a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Every single day of their lives, they meet in their beautiful chapel 7 different times. This is the rhythm of the monastic life and their day. And we were invited, anyone who was at the retreat center, to just come and sit and listen to them, participate in the worship service. And so I did many times. I didn't make it to the 3:45 a.m. vigil. However, I made it to all the other ones, from 5:30 in the morning to 7 o'clock Compline at night. And just being in their presence and listening to their devotion, their chants, their hymns was a beautiful spiritual experience. The Abbey has 3 or 4 miles of hiking trails as well. So when I wasn't joining in the meals or at the worship services, most of my time I spent hiking in the woods in communication with God. It was an incredibly uplifting and rejuvenating experience. I highly recommend everyone, no matter if you're a pastor or not, to spend some time in silence with God. When I came back from my silent retreat, I was able to be in Canton again for just a couple days, and then on June 13th, Sarah and myself and Felix and Zora flew to Spokane, Washington, which is where she is from, and then drove to northern Idaho, a town called Bayview, Idaho, on beautiful Lake Pend Oreille. Her family has had a cabin there for over 40 years. This has been their family's retreat homestead. It's a beautiful place. And so we were based there from June 13th until August 13th when we returned to Canton. While there, we spent an enormous amount of time outdoors. The kids loved the landscape, climbing over the rocks, down by the lakeshore, swimming every day when it was warm enough. It certainly was not warm enough when we first got there in June, but then it warmed up. And we had a chance to spend some time, some quality time together out in that beautiful, wonderful place. We were based there, as I said, and we took some trips from Bayview, Idaho during our 2 months there. Our first major trip was to Yellowstone National Park at the end of June. We took the kids camping. They got to experience camping in a tent for the first time. It was wonderful. We got a chance to see the incredible wonders of the hot springs and Old Faithful Geyser, the incredible geologic wonders which just put all of us in awe of God's handiwork when you're there at Yellowstone. And also the wildlife, of course. We did see grizzly bear, mother with a couple of cubs at a safe distance, an enormous amount of elk and bison, and we even saw a wolf off in the distance, or that's what we were told was a little speck running on the other side of the hills. It was a wonderful, wonderful few days in Yellowstone. What was also amazing is we were able to be there just a week after the park had been shut down due to catastrophic flooding. Now this flooding, of course, was exacerbated by climate change. It really put into perspective just what's happening in the world. We're not as affected here in Ohio as many places by climate change. So I needed to bring that up because the park, so many roads were washed out, and it was an event that had never happened before. They've never closed Yellowstone since it was founded in 1878. We were incredibly fortunate. Our campground was one of 3 that did not flood. One of the 3 campgrounds out of the 10 in the park where people did not have their reservations refunded and were kicked out. So we got to go and have the place almost to ourselves. It was incredibly lucky, but it really made us think about why there were so few people at Yellowstone. From there, we continued on to the birthplace of Sarah's father, my father-in-law, of course, and Riverton, Wyoming. And we were in Riverton for a couple of days. And while there, as I preached about when I first came back, I got to hear an incredible story of Sarah's uncle, Stephen, who wrote after 9/11 about the road trip that he took with his son, Stephen, who was only 8 years old, from Wyoming across the country to Ground Zero. They were there, I think, just 2 weeks after the towers were destroyed. And hearing what he did, reading his article, which is what I preached about on September 11th a couple weeks ago, it was an unexpected gift of our time in Riverton. We also went to the Methodist church where Sarah's grandparents and father grew up. They were singing in the choir. We got a chance to meet the pastor, talk with him a little bit about how things were going there. And we got all kinds of wonderful ideas for some children's ministry ideas from the church. We had a chance to look. They have a beautiful labyrinth in their yard, in their property, and all kinds of wonderful ideas. It's always helpful to go see what other churches are doing, particularly other churches, mainline Protestant churches like ours. So a time in Riverton between the 9/11 article and the visit to the Riverton United Methodist Church was just an incredible added bonus from the time with Sarah's aunt and uncle. Then we drove back through Montana, back into Idaho, and were able to spend a week with cousin time, Sarah's brother and their 2 kids, Finley and Jameson, who are the exact same age as Felix. Felix and Jameson are 5 weeks apart, Finley and Zora are 5 weeks apart. So the 4 cousins get to spend 10 days together around July 4th. It was incredible. They had so much fun, more time in the boat, in the water, went to amusement parks. We just had a really great experience with some family out there in Idaho. We did another camping trip over our anniversary. We celebrated on July 10th, our 12th anniversary. And to do so, we took a camping trip to Montana, back into a beautiful place called Bull Lake, Montana. Sarah and I had actually been there camping before Felix was born, the year before Felix was born, so it was so fun to go back. And we told them stories about how we were so excited to be back there with our kids. And when we were there before, we didn't know if we would have a family or not, and how wonderful it was to be there with our children 8 years later. So that was another great camping experience with our kids. The mosquitoes were a little bit intense, but other than that, it was beautiful and wonderful. Then we came back to Sarah's parents' cabin in northern Idaho, and we were able to celebrate Sarah's 40th birthday, which was also a wonderful experience out there in the place that she loves so much and I have come to love. Not long after that celebration, just a few days later, we hopped on a plane again and flew from Spokane, Washington to Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada, where we met my mother and my great aunt, her sister, and we had a chance to celebrate. We did that on Zora's 5th birthday. So we had a chance to explore the city of Vancouver a little bit. It's a wonderful, beautiful city, right there on the ocean, with mountains rising out of the sea, huge skyscrapers, glorious weather. We were very lucky, of course, to be there when it wasn't raining. And the best part about it was the candy shop. And this is where Zora got to go and pick out anything she wanted on her birthday. It was a lot of fun. The next day, we boarded a Disney cruise ship from Vancouver, and we took an 8-day cruise to Alaska. This, of course, was made possible because of the grant that Sarah applied for, and the Lilly Foundation enabled us to go on this trip, which was just incredible. So we were on the ship. It was full of all your favorite Disney characters. Felix and Zora loved it. She got to celebrate her 5th birthday. We had a chance to see glaciers. We had a chance to do some incredible touring. We took a train ride in Skagway, Alaska, got to see a reenactment of an old gold mining camp. It was pouring rain, but what are you going to do? And even on the train, we had an unexpected adventure. And as you can see here, Felix looks like he's handing out things to the passengers, and he is, because a boulder fell on the tracks we went up to a pass on the border with British Columbia, and by the time we came back down, a boulder had rolled over the tracks, so we were stuck on the tracks for 4 hours in the pouring rain in a tiny car. It was another unexpected experience, but everyone did really well, but I was particularly pleased that Felix decided not only was he trying to help people out and sharing his snacks with the other passengers, he was telling them not to worry, everything's going to be okay, the train's coming. We were getting updates from the train operators and the engineers and the staff, and he was relaying those to everybody else. He really sort of stepped up there, and I just wanted to share that moment. It was a proud papa moment on that stuck train on the middle of a mountainside in the pouring rain in Alaska. You never know what's going to happen. They moved the boulder away. We were able to go back down and then spend some time in Juneau as well, seeing another glacier, the famous Mendenhall Glacier. And of course, it was wonderful to see, but they had all the signs on the trail up to it of where it used to be and how far it has receded and how much climate change has affected Alaska in particular. Another sobering moment, but we wanted our children to see these glaciers before they're gone. It is truly a wonder of nature and one of the beautiful creations in this world to see something, a huge, massive river of ice like that. And so our final stop was in Ketchikan, and we got a chance to see a Tlingit village. They did traditional dances for us, got to tell us a little bit about their native culture, which of course was there long before any Europeans arrived in Alaska. And we saw some of their dances, and we saw some of their totem poles, and we had a wonderful cultural experience also in the rain in Ketchikan, Alaska. And then we came back to Vancouver, flew back to Spokane, went back to Idaho to celebrate Felix's 7th birthday on August 1st. Got to celebrate with him. His grandpa, my father-in-law's birthday is August 2nd, so we celebrated both birthdays in Idaho before driving a long way back. We were able to purchase a minivan in Idaho, and that van made it 2,500 miles back to Canton. On that road trip, we had a chance to go through, see some wonderful hot springs in Montana again. Ended up going to not only the geographic center of the country, which I had always wanted to see as a geographer and a geography nerd, in South Dakota, but we also, of course, saw Mount Rushmore and the Black Hills. We got a chance to go to the Cosmos Mystery Spot. Who knows if it was real or not, but it's one of those places where the houses are tilted and you feel gravity differently, and our kids got a blast out of it. It was a lot of fun. Then the long drive home. And I also got a chance to drive through Iowa, many, many miles of the cornfields of Iowa, but one other thing was growing in those cornfields, and that was windmills. Iowa has over 40% of the state's energy comes from renewable wind at this point. I'd never seen so many windmills in my life, and it was, to me, a beautiful sight to behold. There they were in the middle of the fields, and it was a vision I saw of a renewable and sustainable future, and that made me quite hopeful as I was driving back to Ohio, thinking about the time with my children and hoping that they and their grandchildren will have a future in this world. Our final stop was Indianapolis, Indiana. Sarah was leading a group of clergy as part of her professional development with the Disciples of Christ, and I got a chance to spend some time with the kids at the Indianapolis Zoo, at the world's largest children's museum in Indianapolis, which is just incredible. Recommend bringing your kids or grandkids or great-grandkids if you haven't been. And it's a great city right here in the Midwest. And then the next day we came back to Canton on August 13th. The kids spent some time here hanging out. I got a chance to go to Milk and Honey, one of our favorite places, even spent a little time with the Cleveland Zoo with some wonderful face painting, and then they started school. After being home for a couple of weeks, I had one more birthday celebration. Everyone in our family has summer birthdays. My mom turned 80, and we did celebrate some of that on the Alaskan cruise since she was there. But she was spending her summer, she and her sister, in upstate New York, in a small town called Gowanda, just south of Buffalo, not too far from here. So I drove the last weekend of August, went up to celebrate her 80th birthday with her, and had a chance to spend a little time, quality time with my mother, which was a wonderful experience. So Felix and Zora began kindergarten and first grade. I had some time while they were at school the last couple weeks of August to do some more research about how to be a better leader and train the leaders here at Trinity in these difficult times. So I studied two books, which I'm going to be continuing to talk about. One, Quietly Courageous, by Gil Rendell, and Leading the Church in a Changing World. He wrote this before the pandemic, but the upheaval, of course, in mainline churches have been going on for a long time. And he deals specifically with the importance of not panicking, of not trying to find all these gimmicks to get people into the churches, but to have a deep spiritual connection, to have meaningful worship, to have a quietly courageous view forward and a steady view that will bring people into the church, that will help people to see the value of coming to places like Trinity. And I want to try to share as much as I can of the learnings and what I've read in that book with not only consistory and leadership, but with all of you. The second book, Uproar, was written in 2019, also before the pandemic, but fairly recent, and it's very helpful to remind us also to be calm in these difficult times, not to panic, to see the value of the church, and to help the leadership understand what it means to be a church in the 21st century, which is definitely different than it was 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. We all know that. But what does it mean to be a force for change, a force for God's love, to shine Christ's light, to be a missional church, to be a spiritual church, to be a praying church? That's what he talks about. And the author of Uproar, Peter Stinky, also has 3 other books about congregational leadership. And I'm going to bring consistory through all studies of all of his books. The first one is Healthy Congregations. The second one is Congregational Leadership in Anxious Times. And the third one is How Your Church Family Works. He is an expert on family systems theory and talks about the ways that churches can become dysfunctional, they can stray as a system, and how to address the whole system instead of individuals. And I think those are really important ways to train consistory. I hope that we all can learn together how to be the best leaders that we can for Trinity moving forward. Again, I want to say a huge thank you to the church for this time. I want to say I am so pleased to be able to come back, as wonderful as it was to travel and see all those places, have all those experiences. In some ways, it's even better to come home and to be back in this community, to be back here with you all at Trinity, to be back here in Canton. And I can't wait to continue walking with you all in our journey, wherever it may lead, quietly, courageous, and full of calm and peace. I invite you all into that journey together.